What is up, good people of the world? I don't know who is going to join in at this late notice, but it always surprises me that more than 0 people show up to these. But in any case, I'm going to go ahead and start just improvising a little bit on the piano until get a little bit of an audience going. And then we're going to talk a little bit about piano improvisation, about just some kind of techniques that you can use to kind of just have different ideas to spice up your playing, especially if you're used to like playing licks and stuff like that. And I want to kind of make this video not based or focused on jazz, right? Because a lot of people think that, yeah, I know that sucks. A lot of people's senior recitals, I was going to play on a good friend of mine's junior recital, and it was canceled because of the virus. It's crazy. But in any case, well, hopefully this video can be an escape from the world for a little bit so we can just talk about music. So, but in any case, yeah, so I'm just going to improvise a little bit on the piano. I'm just going to start off trying to be really simple and then just kind of talk you through some of the kind of ways that I'm conceptualizing it. So yeah, Baroque improvisation is fun but difficult because you have to think about what you're doing contrapuntally, and it's a little strict in terms of its technicality, but certainly possible. But we're gonna do some washy stuff to start out with. I know it's a little dull, but I want to talk about specifically just ways. Well, put it this way: if you're a string player, you learn how to play double and triple stops, even though like in the oboe's world, they can't play multiple notes at all, and so they're just not afforded the opportunity. So if you have some kind of crazy thing, you know, you're just like some major seventh or like few instruments can do that and achieve that with that kind of, you know, fluency. And so because of the fact that there's so many different kind of ways of moving your fingers around on the piano and playing composite rhythms, you know, like if you had a brass section, like half of them do this and half of them do the other part, I'd be like, you know, like it would be so difficult for them to be able to keep up the rhythm. But the only reason I can do it is just because I'm a single human being who is connected to both hands. It's like playing a, you know, right, left roll on your snare drum, right? You can go digga 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 digga, but if you just try and do your left hand, the offbeats are like ga 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 ga. Like that's really difficult to do, especially to offset that with someone else. And good snare players can do that. You know, one will do the right, one will do the left, and it'll be like perfect. That's crazy. But in any case, back to the piano. But yeah, so let's just start off in F Lydian. Just got F6 to F major 7, you know, a chill kind of accompaniment. And we already have the 6th and the 7th and the 5th and the root all present in the left hand, so I'm not sure I want to put that in the upper. I'm going to focus on B and G because neither of those notes are inside the chord. Which shares the same pitch collection with F major, but E, Aeolian or Dorian, I haven't played C yet. But now I decided C sharp. So now we know we're 2 sharps. It's literally just a step and a fourth, and I just played it. You know, I'm just playing a shape. Back to F. You know, you can do little quick little flourishes. You know, like kind of Tiger and Hammerstein does those kind of things. I can hold on to the C here. See how the B and the C, so this is fun. See how the B and the C, they both belong to F. You know, they both belong to F. They also both belong to C, Ionian, right? But if I go to A flat, you see how how like, those same two notes is the same dissonant, but in the context of C major or even F, totally acceptable. But the moment you put like A flat, now it's like major chord, minor chord. It's the same dissonance, but it has a different kind of horizontal, it's the same vertical sonority, but it has a different implication because it belongs to a different pitch collection on the circle of fifths, right? So those types of things are important to think about. But also when you're improvising, it's just a good idea to take ideas and toy with them, right? So we'll go into jazzy territory a little bit, but I'll make sure the chord progression is as simple as possible. We'll just choose, since I played it recently on my channel, we'll go with Misty. So the chord progression of Misty is very, very simple. It's just E flat major, right? And then it's a 2 and 2-5. So you know how like we have secondary dominants in classical music, 5 of 3, 5 of 4, 5 of 5. You also can have a 2-5 of one of the chords besides. And so if we're in E flat major, the 4 chord can be a key that we can tonicize. Normally that's Lydian, but if we want to make it Ionian, we can tonicize it. In order to make it Ionian, that D natural has to become a D flat, and that's what's used in the 2-5-1, which is B flat minor, E flat major, now the dominant. Before it was major 7th, and now that takes us to A flat. So, and it's nice too because the melody like focuses on the note D, which is the major 7th that differentiates E flat Ionian from E flat Mixolydian, which is the same thing as B flat Dorian, right? That's why it's really important to be very fluent with all these modes so you can see the patterns. But if I go like, yeah, change to D flat, yeah, that's what makes it so beautiful. And this is fun. So instead of going from like A flat to F minor, and then like B flat to get back to E flat, which would be so terribly dull and boring. Whoever I think it's Earl Garner composed this. Beautiful composer. But once we're on this A flat, it's the 4 of E flat major. So that classic minor 4-1 sound, right? That's literally what this is, right? And the nice thing about that is that instead of turning this A flat minor into like a minor 7th chord that then goes to a 5, because that would give us the note G flat, which doesn't really vibe with E flat major chord, because he's not trying to modulate to G flat. Like he totally could, like A flat minor, D flat. Like if that doesn't even sound like a different tune, I just modulated to G flat major and E flat minor. And so the thing that's cool is that he uses melodic minor. So instead of, which uses the G flats, I'm sorry this isn't an overhead view at the piano. My crane lost a piece, so I'll have to get a new one. But anyway, once we go to this kind of A flat minor chord, and then it's A flat melodic minor, which has that G in it, right? So I can be and then you can hold that, and it actually allows you to resolve. That would be totally different from the direct chromaticism that would result if you used a minor 7th chord. Oops, sorry. Right, that's cool in its own right, but like it's just, too dramatic, whereas plus it's just melodic minor, and that's a totally different set of modes, so that immediately is a kind of coloration shift. Anyway, so it goes back to E flat, and then just does a turnaround to 6, 2, 5, 1. Goes to D flat again, which is again the 5 of the A flat minor. And then uses it to kind of get back. So again, like a lot of people think of using the flat 2 chord as Mixolydian, E flat going to D flat major, but it's E flat Mixolydian. Like Mixolydian. But if I decide to make that a dominant dominant 7th chord, then now the mode is for the E natural there. It's A flat melodic minor, right? So look at the difference. Which is great, but there's also as opposed to, like, it's a huge difference to my ears. Like, melodic minor has this salty, sweet quality, and then the modes just have this strength and cloudiness to them that completely differentiates to them. And I'll answer some of your questions too. But in any case, so like let's just think. So first off, even just that motive. Let's just take the first motive of the melody and perpetuate it across the tune. Started out with that motive, and then we kind of developed it a little bit, made the leaps into steps, kind of some of the things from my thematic development techniques pamphlet that I just released recently. So those kinds of concepts are exactly what's like being applied here. So let's try it with a different motive. So let's just say I have like this yada, just that motive, right? So that was really nice, right? But it's super simple, right? I'm literally just going like, notice how I threw in the flat 9 there? Because you can fudge it, like you can be playing, and if you didn't line up the scale diatonically, numerically properly so that you're going to overshoot or undershoot by a note, you could just throw in a chromatic note, and if you're going to undershoot a note, then just notice it ahead of time and just leap first. So like, in other words, if I do stepwise motion and then skip a note, it's a little bit weird, but if I do leaps first and then stepwise motion, then it sounds perfectly fine, right? So there are kind of these general aesthetic principles that apply to these different kinds of things, but, like, that was just a scale, right? Like, it's just a little motive. Right? This almost kind of cowboy. So, a lot of it is just, as long as you know what scales you're playing, and as long as you know the basic harmonic progression, as long as you focus on particular tones, like, because that's the thing, like for example, and I'll switch this to be in C major to make things easy. But let's say I'm going like minor 4 to 1, and I'm just gonna doing like, right? And so those notes are important. But then instead of going do, I could go or which is kind of like ooh, right? Right? You get the point, but like, just really get these sounds in your ears and toy around. And I found it to be very, very useful to hum. Because if you just play, you'll just be like, just play dumb crap, right? But like, if you actually like shut off your left brain and stop your motor skills from just doing the things that you normally do and actually think about what you're playing and slow down a little bit. There's a lot of fun that can be had with basic patterns. And as long as you know your scales, nothing is ever going to sound wrong. If you play something bad, you can make it good by what you do after. I think it was Herbie Hancock that said something akin. But let's see if we can find an example of that. So let's say if I'm like playing a tune. So like, let's say I didn't mean to play dominant 7 there. Well, if I did, I could then resolve it where it wants it to, As an improviser, if you're not bound by harmonic changes, and even if you're playing solo piano, you can still get back to where you came from just by allowing the harmony to go where it wants to go. If I'm just playing like, let's say I accidentally play an A flat there on E flat, so that way it sounds like iota. That sounds kind of better. Right? Like that. That sounded terrible. That's, but the moment you then do something else with the motive becomes justified. Like you brought it in, even though it was a little bit awkward, just kind of stop the existing conversation, but then you switch to it and it ended up making sense, and so it kind of replaces. So I know a lot of people are skeptical about, the idea that they're skeptical of the idea that you can fix anything after playing it wrong. And of course, at a certain point, people are going to notice. But one little mistake, you can certainly let it take you in an alternate direction that you wouldn't normally go in. Anyway, I'm not going to drown on forever, and I can demonstrate other things if you guys want me to. But I'm going to go ahead and check out the chat. Already a bunch of messages. It's crazy. Any broken improvisation splits? Oh, I'm glad you stopped. Where have you studied theory? I've been studying theory like a nerd since I was like probably like 9 years old. But like I formally studied theory in high school at some arts program, Artios Academies, and then I also studied it again in Furman University, and then I was theory TA for 2 years. But I've done a lot of self-study too. Excuse me. Yes, it will definitely be archived on my channel. What would you say are the best resources to learn jazz in self-taught way? Books, just playing lead sheets with an app like iReal Pro. Yeah, so I would say like first composition. For me, that's the most important thing, and figure out what like all the general kind of like conventions are. Like even just starting out, like it's very important for me to start from fundamental first principles. So like for example, everyone's like, you got to do all this crazy stuff for jazz, but like, can you just like play a beautiful solo on a completely diatonic 2-5-1? Like just. never played anything outside of white keys. Right, just nothing but white keys, right? So like it's important to be able to be completely comfortable in one pitch collection before you start adding all of this, before you start doing crazy with all that other stuff. Okay, let me just check out some of these other things. I'm glad you find it interesting, Jose. But one of these things. Excuse the awkward close-up of my face. Can I do fugues? I cannot improvise fugues, but I've written several fugues. Yeah, I'm definitely planning on live streaming more often. What are some good tutorials on inducing melodic tension release? Interesting. A lot of it is just like experimenting. I don't have perfect pitch. I have relative pitch. The control you have to feel like this stuff. Maybe keyboard. I think having an upper view of my fingers might help. But it's also fun to just mess around with ideas, like for example, just like a tinker, like a scientist, like just mixing chemicals together. So like if I start on like F, I think I might be able to put you down further so you can see the piano better. Look at that. So if I start on F, and then if I go to classical romantic improvisation is pretty easy because it's just like typical kinds of chord progressions. Like obviously I'm joking and making a caricature, but like, a lot of classical music is like, for example, like you could take the Bach progression, like 1, 2, 4, 2, 5, 6, 5, 1. Right, so it's been a long time since I played that, but like most of that's just 5-1. The C minor fugue is mostly just 5-1, you know, so you can get away with a lot with just like 5-1, you know, half diminished 2, like the half diminished sound. I mean, just look at that. Like, that's beautiful. It's literally just half diminished chords going down to 5, right? Don't these, you know, basic, don't take for granted these basic musical things that are beautiful, you know, like 2-5-1. Like, that's beautiful, right? You know, don't let the fact that you've heard it a billion times make you forget how beautiful that is. And that's why a lot of people, I think, overdo it. A lot of people just focus on the new crap so they can appear to be fresh and, you know, not bore themselves. But like, you should mix the new stuff with the old stuff. Oh yeah, sorry. 2-5-1 is just like a chord progression that's very common in music. Where basically, if you're in like one of the standard 7 Greek modes, the major scale, you're probably familiar with the major scale. If you label each scale degree numbers, like C is 1, D is 2, and so on and so forth, there's 7. And if you label them as Roman numerals, with lowercase Roman numerals being minor and uppercase Roman numerals being major, if you were to label a progression like 2-5-1, it just means the chord built on the triad built on 2, the triad built on 5, and the triad built on 1. So in the case of C major, a 2-5-1 would be D minor, G major, C major. But if I play it like this, it's like the basic idea is 2-5-1, but some of the chords have extensions on them, but they're all built off of the same kind of triads, right? Which have a certain root fifth motion. You know, and the perfect fifth is a very strong interval, and you know, because of the overtone series, because it's so early in the overtone series, and that's why the circle of fifths is built out of the fifth. And the fifth is interesting, and just in general too, because it's like from a set, not to get technical here, but from a set theoretical perspective. You know, there are only two interval cycles. So an interval cycle is where you basically perpetuate the same interval over and over again and you see what the patterns are. And like our 12-tone equidistant tuning system, one of the interesting things about it is that because it's based off the number 12, and there's reasons why the number 12 was derived, you know, trying to approximate, well, I guess I should start back from the very beginning and give a little bit of a, so, you know, the problem, there are two kinds of compositional idioms back in medieval times, you know, vocal music, infinite gradations in your vocal cords, so you can start on any pitch and just, if I want to sing a perfect fifth up, I go up just intonation following the overtone series. And so, I mean, the important thing to realize is like, if I go up from this note C and fifths tuned with the overtone series and I get to E, that E is going to be in different tune than if I went up the C overtone series and found E in it, right? It's going to be totally different in terms of intonation. And so, in any case, to skip a lot of history, the advancement, the innovation that was made is they figured out that if you put a bunch of justly intoned, you know, fifths in a row, you eventually get at a pitch which, if displaced by an octave, again, just reduced by a half ratio, 0.5, if you reduce it down, it ends up only being 24 cents away from the pitch that you started on. That means that, you know, since there are 12 fifths before you get to that 24 cents, you know, 24 divided by 12 is 2, and so each fifth is 2 cents off. So this means, if you inverse it mathematically, that if you create a 12-tone equidistant scale and just quantize those steps inside the octave, the number 12 is so rich in factors, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, that there are a lot of different intervals that are very close to being in tune with the natural fractional intervals of the overtone series. And one of the points that I make in the beginning of my upcoming part writing book is that the human ear is unbelievably good at approximating these intervals. And so if you hear this, which is not perfectly in tune with the overtone series, your brain sort of like, you know, rounds it off to a simpler ratio if it's similar enough. And to the degree that it's different from that, then it sounds more dissonant to the ears. But again, it has to do with these small kind of overtones canceling each other out when the two notes are not in tune with one another. Because in some sense, when things are in tune with one another, they're actually louder, right? But in any case, where was I going with all this? The 12-tone equally tempered tuning system. Oh yeah, interval cycles. The 5-7 interval cycle. So if you go through different interval cycles, if you start like in set theory, 0, 1, 2, 3, you know, we sort of assign integers to all the numbers. And if we go through the numbers 1 and 11, you know, clockwise and counterclockwise, if you were to draw a clock face with 0, 1, you know, just like in our decimal system, we don't have, the number 10 is not a number, it's just 1 plus 0. The numbers, 10 of them are 0 through 9, right? It's the same thing with set theory, 0 through 11. And, but in any case, not to get too technical, we have the chromatic scale, the 210 interval cycle is the whole tone scale. There are two of them which combine together to form the aggregate, meaning all 12 pitches. And the number 3 and 9 give you perpetuating minor thirds or major sixths. Gives you the fully diminished 7th chord. 4 and 8, which also have factors of 2 and 10, gives you the augmented chords. Each whole tone scale contains 2 different augmented chords. Right? And then after 4 and 6, then it's 5 and 7. And all of the other interval cycles just give you subsets. The even numbered whole tone scale is the subset of 12 pitches. Only the chromatic scale, when we repeat that interval, gives us the aggregate of all 12 pitches, except for the circle of fifths. If you go through every single pitch from a fifth, it happens to go through every single one because 5 and 7 are both primes, which do not share any common factors with the 12, and you have to multiply either of those numbers times 12, which is why you get 12 different fifths, and it all amounts to an equidistant pitch collection. And here's another fascinating thing, and then I'm going to stop ranting about the mathematics, because I know some of you are not interested in this. But one of the fascinating things is that if you create an asymmetrical pattern, if you draw a shape of it on a clock face on set theory, integers 0 through 11, as opposed to the circle of fifths, where the pitches are arranged in fifths, one's chromatic, one's the circle of fifths, the asymmetrical patterns are not isomorphic to each other at all. They're completely different. But anytime you create like an augmented chord that draws out a triangle, an augmented chord, a fully diminished 7th chord, any kind of interval cycle that's comprised of a symmetrical pitch collection, the shape ends up being the exact same on the circle of fifths that it does in the set theory clock face, even though the organizational method is completely different, which just blows my mind mathematically that that's even geometrically possible. But that's a story for another time. Let me answer more questions. Okay. If you wish to play with a pet MIDI 251 or review, there's a possible perfect pitch. Yeah, I don't think perfect pitch is that important. I really don't. I usually get too melodic for chops. People are too lick splitting. Oh, screw people. Do whatever is beautiful to you. I mean that. I really do. I don't mean screw people. I just mean like screw their opinions of what you should do. Just be honest with yourself and like really try to make things that are as beautiful as you possibly can make them, but follow your own aesthetic principles. Some people like more busy crap that's crazy, like me. Some people like more melodic stuff. I have like two parts of me. There's a part of me that just wants, the child in me wants to write, you know, like simple diatonic music, which really affects me, you know. But then there's another part of me that loves exploring, like exploring, like interesting kind of new ideas. So those are always fighting. Not even fighting, they're just corroborating. Do you have a math science background as well? No, I do not. I did take some mathematics and science classes. And that's always been an interest of mine. I always loved science. And I wasn't a huge fan of like math in high school, but once I started getting into set theory and the mathematics of music, it became much more interesting to me. I just didn't find doing algebra problems, even when I understood how to do them over and over and over again, even though I've already proved that I could do them. I just found that to be a waste of time in school, a huge waste of time. But yeah, so I don't have a professional background, but I've kind of, done some study. Yeah, so questions, go for it in terms of questions. Ask all the questions you want. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here and improvise and mess around. But, like if we're going down to major 7th chords, E and F, both of these can maintain. So if I'm going down to E, then I keep the E. Pivots are really fun. Got some questions. Yeah, what your child wants to write in the intellectual side. Yeah, make sure that one doesn't control the other. How do you manage your time to be this adept in so many areas of music? Well, part of it was I was lucky because I was homeschooled. I was homeschooled for pretty much my entirety. I went to Artios Academy to do like it was, and I've been to co-ops and stuff and taken external classes, but the majority of my schooling is at home. And so most of the days of school I just did from like 9 a.m. to like 11 or 12 p.m. at the latest. And I skipped a couple grades in middle school and high school too, because you can do that when you're homeschooled. And so, yeah, that gave me a lot of free time. And I also started really young, but you don't have to. There's still plenty of time, to learn all this stuff. You don't have to be super fast. No need to be impatient. Just do the best that you can with the time that you have in the place where you are with the brain that you've been afforded. And that's all that can be expected of you. And you surprise yourself with how much just that will accomplish. I'm going to drink of water. My voice is dying, so I might have to head out soon, unfortunately. So ask more questions. I'll take like 5 more questions. Immediately what came to my mind. D on top of E flat. Homeschooling, haha. I do sing. I'm terrible at singing, as you will know if you've watched any of my videos. But I have sung in a lot of. I can hold a pitch because I have a good ear, but my vocal technique is terrible. Anyway, but I actually was the music director of the Bell Tower Boys, which is kind of the men's choir glee club at Furman University for a couple of semesters. So that's crazy. I was the music director of a choir. And I'm a terrible conductor. I really am. Do you use your notation software when writing your electronic music? When I'm writing electronic music, I'm generally governed more by the textural quality of the sound, and so I really have to be in Logic. I oftentimes, even if I'm writing in the DAW, I have a corroborative workflow between Sibelius and Logic, where I will be writing something in Logic based on the sounds that I'm hearing from the sample libraries. And then I just have this moment where I want some really nice counterpoints, and then I just go in Logic because I like that Sibelius, and I like that workflow better. I get the counterpoint written out, and then I just perform my parts in. I often find myself going back and forth between the DAW and the notation software. The notation software is more of a visual aid because I just like the way it lays everything out, and I find that I'm faster with it. Let me go through more of these. How do you feel about the chord scale method? I don't even know what that is. Does that just mean that there's a scale that can go with every chord? There are different scales that can go with every chord, and you can have multiple scales simultaneously. And there is a somewhat ambiguous distinction between chord and scale. Is this a chord or is that a scale? And there's a little bit of a discussion about that in my book. So I don't know. I don't know enough about. I'm not most of my theoretical stuff comes from me, and then I just read in a book that someone else discovered that and named it. But like most of it is generated, and so there's not a lot. I'm not always intimately familiar with. Like someone just talked to me the other day about if it's like a really big theory like Schenkerian analysis, then I'll know about it. But if it's just some like the Schillinger method of composition, like I don't know, I hear about these methods that people have. Excuse me. What are your primary goals for composition, and in how many genres? I feel like getting good at being a composer is a singular task regardless of the genre. I feel like there are aesthetic principles that apply to every genre, no matter what it is. There are a lot of them, and I feel like most of my brain is filled with those principles. There's not a lot of my brain is not like world music, jazz, and things aren't separated from one another. Like I use jazz harmony in my classical music, and it's all mixed and mingled. It's just abstract kind of ideas. But as far as goals for myself are, for me, it's just like I want to be as good as I possibly can be in all the major aspects. I want to be good at form. I want to make sure that my pieces are tight and well developed and that I develop my material creatively in ways that people don't expect, but in ways that still satisfy them emotionally. And I kind of want to balance yin and yang. I want there to be enough chaotic, new, novel, creative ideas to keep them interested, but enough organization of thematic material and formal structure that it feels like there's a point to all of it. It's not just a bunch of random ideas, but they amount up to some larger idea. And I'll often be consistent about like certain relationships, like C and B, the notes and the chords. Those are inextricably linked to one another and used in different ways throughout all four movements of my symphony. So I like to have organizing factors like that. I want to make sure my harmonic language is constantly expanding, not just in terms of quantity, adding more notes and extensions, but in terms of quality. How do I choose the particular harmonic progressions that I do? Are there processes that can subvert my natural intuitive inclination to play the same kinds of progressions that I think are all that's possible, but in reality that's just an illusion and there's infinitely more possible? I'm just thinking inside of a box of heuristics. Can I mitigate that? But at the same time, I don't want to paralyze myself by being so fundamental at the layer of abstraction that is the deepest, such that I can't get anything done because there's just too much to think about. So like all these things kind of balance together. Like I want to make sure my workflow is efficient as possible. I want to make sure that I have all the hotkeys that I need made so that I can be as efficient as possible. I want to make sure that I properly allocate my schedule every day so that I can get composition and study and work done. I want to make sure that I'm healthy as an individual and eating well and getting plenty of cardio and getting at least 8 hours of sleep. All these things combined together as general goals, and they seem overwhelming when you combine them all together, but if you split them into sub problems with specific steps and then implement new habits one at a time with incremental progress, you'd surprise yourself with how much of a dramatic shift that you can be as an individual and what your potential is and how much better it is. Because there's a risk with trying new things that you're going to fall on your face and it's going to be worse than it was originally, and it might initially, but there's the fact that the risk pays off more often than not if you wait long enough, because of all the hard work. Looking through some of these. What are your primary goals for? Yeah, okay. What's the most edible instrument? Probably, in terms of the sound, the harp. It just sounds like candy. It just sounds like candy. And the harp, a harmonic on harp sounds like a Smarties tastes like. So I don't know if that answers your question. Okay. So I'll just answer a couple more and then I'll head out. How do you cope with days you get demotivated to work on music when you're very distracted? I just push through and I keep working on music anyway. It's like going to work when you're sick, except for if you are sick, then you should rest and chill. And there's nothing wrong with having a rest day or, hanging out with your friends. But if you have nothing better to do, then you should still compose and you should still study, even if I'm always working on some project in which there's some mundane, detailed little task that's completely uncreative that I have to do. So anytime I'm having an uninspired day, I would just allocate it to doing those kinds of tasks, right? And get a little reading in if it's really particularly uninspiring. But I don't know. I don't get down. I don't know if it's temperament or what, but I tend to be pretty optimistic. And if I run into a problem when composing a piece of music, it doesn't faze me at all. I just keep trying to solve it. You see it in my videos, right? I'll be writing something and then I'll be like, nope, that's wrong. And then nope, that's wrong. Nope, that's wrong. Nope, that's wrong. No, that's wrong. No, what about this? No, well, maybe I could fix this. No, like one bar, I'll go and I just keep doing that. I just keep pressing on. And eventually I know that the answer is going to come immediately. Even if not immediately. It's hard to write a symphony because it's just a big musical work. All right, one more. How long have you been playing piano? Okay, I'll answer these last two questions. How long have you been playing piano, and what are your views on musical structure? I've been playing piano since I was like 4. I started picking things out by ear, like the Neverending Story theme, on the piano. I started taking lessons when I was like 6, if I remember correctly. But I hated my piano teachers, and they hated me because they wanted me to play Bach and Beethoven and Brahms, and I wanted to write my own stuff. And the thought of someone being a composer did not occur to me at that time. So I kind of dropped lessons when I was 12, and my mom, being very wise, she was like, honey, like, just, this is stressing you out too much. Like, I love hearing you play, just making up your own stuff. And there's no reason that, if this is going to make you not enjoy playing the piano, it's a bad thing. So she stopped me having lessons. And then I just kind of developed my own ideas, until I was like 16. And then I started taking lessons again. I got a little bit more serious about learning the DAW. I didn't really learn how to read sheet music until I was 16. Honestly, I really did not. I was terrible with reading before then. You can ask anyone who knew me during that time period, and they will say that I'm terrible at reading. So yeah, and then I took kind of a year of self-study and made my first YouTube videos. And then after that gap year, I went to Furman and then just graduated this past, spring of last year. And then here I am. So yeah. To answer the question about form, my idea of musical structure is kind of Schenkerian. I don't like Schenkerian's particular method. Well, I like his methods, but I don't like his conclusions. I think the conclusions that he makes are very erroneous and very occidentally centric, very like Western centric. But the idea of thinking of music at different levels of abstraction, I'm always doing that, like little motives being repeated with rhythmic displacement inside of a sentence structure that is the antecedent of what has a consequent phrase, which makes us a period, which is separated by a transition, and there's a different period before that, and that makes the C section. Thinking music at different levels of abstraction. I think learning form the way that people teach it is terrible, personally. Like form, rondo, sonata, theme and variation, like, just cookie cutters that you can write music inside of. I hate that. Like, there are all kinds of formal structural principles, but that's going to open up a massive can of worms that I can't open up now. So one of these days I will have a monologue about formal structure on YouTube and can express some of those thoughts. But my voice is dying, and I gotta, teach students tomorrow, so I have to make sure that I have some of it left. And I've been going to bed early lately. So I think I will call it quits, but I will play a very short piece of music that I'm making up on the spot. Is all that really necessary? Maybe not. Sure, that's on your own piano. F major 7. C major 7. Even go from the 9th to the 7th chromatically, like Ocarina of Time. So it doesn't have to be flourishing. It could just be the fact that anyone would want to give up piano means you miss the whole point of what I'm talking about. Like you can just play with the white keys. You can just play with the pentatonic scale. When I was like 5 years old, I literally was like. And that gave me so much joy. I loved that. And I still enjoy just playing that now, even though it's with my fist, right? So it doesn't matter what your musical ability level is. Music is what's amazing. It's not me, it's not Beethoven, it's not John Williams. That we're not what's amazing. We're just paying attention to the patterns of the universe and then trying to represent them with musical tones and abstraction, but we're just observing patterns and then replicating it. That's all that we're doing, you know? And so if it's just like, if it's just like, again, like Lydian, like it never gets old. Like just that sound, like there's so much there emotionally. Like I could just sit here and just play chords with slight little note adjustments. Like that's a complicated emotion. What about this? What about this? Totally different. What about this? Ooh, it's a little sinister. What about this? Ooh, that's a little bit like deep, It's like things are dire, but you've kind of reconciled yourself with your fate. It's like something's wrong here. Something smells fishy, Like an ice glade where, it was frozen by some witch. The moon is out and the wolves are howling. You can smell the gingerbread baking in the oven from the distance. You cozy into bed at night. The only reason I can do what I do in terms of composing and playing the piano is just because I've spent so much time making friends with the notes, and the patterns that they make and just thinking about that on a daily basis, right? And you can do the same thing. You all have brains and fingers. There's nothing special about my fingers. Like there's nothing, my fingers are not better than any of your fingers, right? My brain, like I'm speaking normal English. I'm not some alien, right? So like, you can, it's just a matter of time and having fun while doing it. The thing I've never felt like motivated, like, oh, I want to become the best composer ever, competitively. That's not my vibe. My vibe is like, I enjoy it. I have so much fun messing around, with, I can be alien-like at times. Again, like, think about language. Last little postulation. Think about language. When you were a baby, like most people can speak. We're improvising what we speak all the time, right? So like, when you were a baby and you first learned to speak, it was laborious. You had ba, ka. Had to learn every single individual sound. Then the phonics and the ba-at ran into and then you had to think about it to be able to comprehend it. And now most of you can just like speed read through full sentences and speak fluently. All of you can do that. That's not a special talent of the human race. I'm convinced the only reason music is a rarer talent is because we don't spend nearly as much time practicing music or learning music from a young age the way that we are completely and thoroughly ensconced with language. Now, language is essential. I'm not bashing language, but I'm just saying that like the natural ability of the human brain to build levels of abstractions that can then be manipulated fluently with the prefrontal cortex is unbelievable. And everyone who like has an average IQ or higher, which is like, almost all of you, has the ability to get good at these things. And I truly even believe, even if someone does have some cognitive impairments, that they can still learn it. It just takes a little bit longer, right? Music is not at all. Everyone makes music. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're an intellectual or just the average Joe, or whether or not, you're interested in the music theory of music. There's so many different genres of music. So, what's important is that you're getting genuine emotional expression out of music, and that the way music expresses emotion helps you contextualize the emotional aspects of your life and gives you wisdom, and just listen to music and enjoy it and just let it affect you, and then figure out what's going on out of sheer wondrous curiosity, and then play it on the piano and mix it with other things and then post it for the world, and then every person that likes it, cheer them on, and if someone dislikes it, then just completely ignore it and just like rely on your own conception. I'm not saying be selfish, but like rely on your own conception of what you want your work to be. And it doesn't have to be super ambitious. It could just be like, I want to be able to sit down and play something really nice and melodic with a simple 4-chord chord progression. There is nothing at all wrong or demeaning about a goal so humble as that, right? And there's actually a lot of creativity required to make a convincing piece of music inside of only a 4-chord chord progression without affording yourself all of the other tools in the toolbox, right? So be careful in following general public conceptions of these issues, because I find them to be erroneous 99% of the time. What the general public agrees, I disagree with. Not just because I'm being contrarian, but I think individual people are much smarter than people as a collective are. But that's just my opinion. So we'll leave it at that for now. So it has been fun. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate the nice turnout at completely unexpected notice. And until next time, you all have a great time composing. Adios.